Alright, welcome back for part 2 of 1.8. In this one we have only 3 slides to do, so it should be pretty fast. No promises though. We're going to finish talking about compound inequalities and more specifically what interval notation is. So if you look at this inequality right here, x is less than or equal to negative 3, you can use this to describe a portion of the number line called an interval. Okay, you can also use interval notation to describe an interval on the number line. Interval notation includes the use of 3 special symbols. These include parentheses, brackets, and infinity. Okay, so we use parentheses when there is a less than or a greater than symbol. And this tells us that the endpoints are not included. Okay, so parentheses are for when they're not included. Brackets are these little square looking parenthesis things. We use those when there is an equal to sign, so your endpoints are included. And then we are going to use infinity and negative infinity here. So use infinity when it goes on, the interval goes on in a positive direction. Use negative infinity when it goes on in a negative direction forever. Okay, so if we look at this, we have x is greater than 2. So to graph that, we start at 2. It's a closed circle because it's an equal to. Closed circle, and then it goes on, it's greater than, so it goes on that way forever. So to write that in interval notation, you're going to start at your endpoint. So you're going left to right, so look at your graph. Start at your endpoint at 2. That is included. So it's a bracket like this, comma, and then it goes on forever in the right direction, the positive direction. So that's going to be a positive infinity. And when you do infinities, nothing can ever actually touch infinity, so we always use parentheses with an infinity. Okay, this is not an ordered pair, so this is not a point that you're plotting. So don't get confused about that. This is an interval. So when you read this, it says it starts at 2, ends at positive infinity. Okay, which really never ends, but it approaches positive infinity. Okay, if we have x is less than 2, so in this one it's a closed circle, and it's less than, so it's going to the left. So when you write this, again we read left to right, so the furthest left it hits is going to be what goes left forever, so it's going to be negative infinity like that. So parentheses, because it's an infinity, it's a bad parenthesis. Parenthesis, there we go, negative infinity, and it stops at 2. And in this case, it does not touch 2, it's an open circle, so it's another parenthesis. Okay, so that's what the singular inequalities will look like when we have our compound inequalities. Let me scroll down. Oh, that's it. Okay. When we have our compound inequalities, this says x is between 1 and 5. Okay, so we're going to start at 1. It's a open circle because it's equal to. Stops at 5 with a closed circle. Come on. There we go. We're shading everything in between. Okay, to write that, we're not going to use infinity because it doesn't go forever in either direction. So we're going to start at 1, and that's going to be a parenthesis because it's an open circle. It's going to stop at 5, and that's going to be a bracket because it's a closed circle. So from 1 to 5, everything in between there. Now, when you do or, you have to have 2 intervals because there's 2 different things happening here. So the first one is x is less than 3, so we start at 3 here, closed circle, or open circle, goes left, so that one's going to be negative infinity, because it is approaching negative infinity. It stops at 3, there's both parentheses, or x is greater than or equal to 4, so closed circle, goes to the right, so or, start at 4, it's a bracket, to infinity, and again, that's always a parenthesis. Okay, so you can write it like that. We also can use a symbol called a union. Okay, so which basically we just replace this or, and it looks like a U. Try that again. Okay, what that means is that your interval goes from negative infinity to 3. It skips everything in between these numbers, so it skips all of this stuff. That's where the union is. then it starts again at 4 and goes to infinity. So you can either write the word or you can use a union. I don't think there's a union symbol on the computer, so you might want to type or. This is on Canvas, so. Alright. That's what interval notation looks like. So if we look at this one, it says, problem 5, what is the graph of -4 to 6? And -4 is included. So I'm going to write my graph. Again, I only really need these two endpoints here, -4, 6. And this is going to be an open circle, because it's a, well, no, this is a closed circle. This is an open circle. Okay, and it's going to be everything in between there. I'm shading all this stuff. Okay, that's what the graph would look like, and how do we write that as an inequality? Well, is this going to be an and or an or? Well, it's shading everything in between things, so it's going to be an and. So I'm going to write my x in the middle. Remember, we use less than signs. One of them is going to be equal, and that's going to be this 4 here, so that's going to be here. And I go 4 to -4 to 6. Okay, so that's what the inequality should look like. And then on to B, it says what is the graph of x is less than or equal to -1 or x is greater than 2. So again, I have my -1 and my 2. So a graph start at -1, that's going to be a closed circle. This one's going to be an open circle. And then my shading in between or off to the side. Well, this is an or, so probably off to the side, but let's find out. X is less than -1, so everything less than -1 should be to the left. So yep, back here. And then x is greater than 2, so everything bigger than 2 is to the right. Okay, so this is an or, that's what the graph looks like. Now how do we write this in interval notation? So when you're doing interval notation, remember you have this gap here, so this is going to be like a union thing, or you can write the word or. That's bad. Okay, and this side, it goes all the way back to -infinity. That's the leftmost point, and it stops at -1. And that is included, so that would be a bracket. Then we skip a bunch of numbers in between -1 and 2. We start again at 2, and it goes to infinity. Okay, and these will all be, well, that will definitely be a parenthesis. 2 is open circle, so that will also be a parenthesis. So that is how you would write it in interval notation. Alright, I will let you guys try this next one. It says, what is the graph of -2, 7? And how do you write it as an inequality? What is the graph of y is greater than 7? And how do you write that as an interval notation? Okay, so go ahead and pause this in 3, 4, just kidding, 3, 2, 1, stop. What's happening? Stop. Okay, so hopefully your answers look something like this. So A is a compound inequality with and, so it's everything between -2 and 7. And we can write that as -2 is less than x is less than or equal to 7. It's equal because the bracket is on the 7. Parenthesis on the 2 because it's not equal to. Okay, and then B, this is just a singular inequality. So we have y is greater than 7. So I put a open circle on the 7 and shade it to the right because it's greater than. And then I wrote my interval notation. It starts at 7, not inclusive. So parenthesis goes to infinity, which is also a parenthesis. Okay, so it should look like that. Alright, so that is interval notation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in class or send me a reminder or something. But you will see interval notation a lot. Don't get confused with interval notation confused with an ordered pair, because you're not plotting the point 7 infinity. It's not a point, it's a interval. Okay? So don't get those things confused. Alright, I will see you guys in the next one. Adios. Konnichiwa. Goodbye.